So what is this session about? We've not run this session before. Normally we're straight into the keynotes and we're straight into throwing new and challenging thoughts and information at you. And we thought this year we would take a step back and try and set the scene before we go next door and get into the thick of the keynotes. And in particular, we want to frame the rest of the event, help you make sense of the rest of the event and the sessions and the clinics and the workshops that you'll be enjoying, but also to make sure everybody's up to speed with the next generation CSP's journey that we've been on over the last year. I will be involving some of my colleagues. It won't just be me for the next hour, you'll be pleased to know, and I'll be inviting other people up to contribute to different elements of the presentation. But really about setting the scene and hopefully helping you to get the most out of the rest of the event, because you'll understand kind of why we've put the content that we have together and how it all makes sense. And as I say, this session is to get everybody up to speed. So we've shared some of this that we're talking to you about today at some of our sessions with directors, at our AGM. We've run some sessions for board members and chairs over the last few months. So some of you will have seen some parts of this, but I don't think we've presented the whole framework in the way that we're going to today. And I hope it gets, and some of you will be new entirely too. So the objective at the end of this session, certainly by the end of the conference, is to have a pretty good idea of what we mean when we're talking about the next generation CSP's journey. But before I get into the journey and looking ahead, I think it would be remiss not to just mention the day job, the day-to-day work that's going on. There is a huge amount of change, and that will be a recurring theme this morning and probably throughout the event. But amidst that change, you in this room are continuing to deliver great stuff, great impact. You know the stats for your area, and on this screen are some of the stats that we collect nationally. And it's just to remind ourselves of the significant scale and impact that we're delivering day to day, and that while we're all thinking about the future and we're all thinking about the change that is needed, we've all got busy day jobs delivering here and now and continuing to create impact. And it's important we don't take our eye off that ball in thinking about the future and thinking about the changes that are needed and starting to that change journey. We keep remembering about delivering the things that are in front of us. However, we do have a significant new direction, don't we? And you'll all be pretty familiar with this now. These new strategies, Sporting Future, they published their one-year report last month from government, setting out a real, radically new direction for sport in this country. And off the back of that, we've had, don't run ahead with me. Off the back of that, we've had the Childhood Obesity Strategy, we've had the Sport England Strategy, very much in sync with that strategy. Andy Reid is here, who conducted the CSP appraisal halfway through last year. And of course, we've got all our significant major contracts coming to an end shortly, and a whole set of new funding regime, contracts, performance management ahead of us. So a real period of significant change. But if you look at that and you reflect on those documents, it's a real positive statement. We're referenced in each of those documents. We're referenced positively as having a key role to play in the future of sport in this country, and really sets a great foundation for us to move forwards. But change is the recurring theme, and I touched on this slide last year because we were kind of just launching into this period of uncertainty. And I put it on again, partly to reiterate that the change is still there, this change is still working through. Today is not about having all the answers for you. Some of the stuff we're going to present this morning is kind of where we are on a journey, and we haven't concluded everything yet. So the change is still there, but it's all positive. And most importantly, I want you to think about the change in a slightly different way from this morning. So this slide talks about how we respond to change in our day jobs and in our areas. And I want to ask you to think differently about our role in change, because actually I think our role is charting, managing and directing and influencing that change. It's not really responding to change. Certainly when you go back into the day job in your locality, we are, I think, change agents trying to drive change in our area. We're not trying to continue the status quo. We're trying to make a difference, and we're trying to do things differently. So just a slightly different message I want you to think about. What is your role, not in responding to the changes that are coming down nationally, but in actually driving change in your locality and what you want that to look like? And we talked about next generation CSPs, and we teed this up last year, and we spent the last 12 months working through what we think the next generation of CSPs needs to look like. And if you recall, we talked about the first generation of CSPs, very much program deliverers as active sports partnerships. The next generation of CSPs, which were around for around 10 years that we've had, really about helping other people to deliver their plans and programs, so very much helping NGBs to deliver their programs locally, helping Sport England and government to deliver some of their programs locally. And so we've raised the question throughout the last year, what do the next generation CSPs need to look like? And we've really taken a good hard look, we've taken a step back and said, we think we do some pretty good stuff, but the world is changing and we need to change too. And let's have a real think about what that needs to look like. And you've all started to do that locally, because I've seen new strategies coming out, new thinking, restructures of teams. You've had a look at those national strategies and you're already on this journey. So what is the next generation of CSPs all about? And I think just to box it off right at the outset here, we've gone from program delivery, we've gone from sort of behind the scenes, B2B, helping other people deliver their programs. Where we've centred on for the next generation CSPs is as real strategic agencies for sport and physical activity in this country. That real strategic leadership, strategic influencing, strategic coordination of the sector, support of the sector, but also influencing people out with and beyond the sector. And we'll talk more about that as we go through this morning. But if you remember one thing about how we want to think about the next generation of CSPs, we may still do other things, we may still, I'm sure, deliver national programmes for Sport England and government. But where we want to be in the future and where we want our stakeholders to be really clear about the role and contribution that we play is this strategic leadership and strategic influencing. That's not to be confused, I don't think, with being the strategic lead for sport and physical activity, because we know it's much more subtle than that, and often we're trying to help and encourage other people to take strategic leadership role for the sector. But nevertheless, it is about leadership, it is about influencing, and that will be a recurrent theme throughout this morning and throughout the rest of the event. But as I say, we haven't concluded this journey yet this morning. We've been on this journey a little while now, and it started off by conversations with many of you saying, do we need to change? Do we have an appetite for change? And you very strongly said, yes, we think we're doing a bloody good job locally, but we recognise there's a need for us to evolve and change. We then had a real good look at the strategic context, the Sporting Future strategy in particular, but other government strategies we've been looking at from transport, health and elsewhere. And we brought those together to think tanks with directors, with some of our work strand groups, with some of our sessions with chairs, to get the information. And everything that we present back to you this morning has essentially come from those sessions and has essentially come from you. And we've reinterpreted it and we're putting it back to you this morning to explain what that looks like. We therefore agreed a draft framework, which we'll present to you today. And that was agreed at our AGM in November, that we were comfortable, the directors of the CSPs were comfortable that that provided a useful framework to move forward with. But we know we don't work in isolation, and in particular, we want government, Sport England and many of our other stakeholders to be fully behind our future direction, and actually for that to be as integrated as it possibly can. And so what we're in the middle of now, and you'll be aware of it because many of you have been involved in it, is discussions and dialogue with Sport England and government about what role we can play for them in the implementation of their strategies, and indeed how we can totally integrate our future next generation strategic framework with the work of Sport England. And that is ongoing, and you'll get a flavour of that this morning from Jenny as to what their thoughts are. And our mission then is towards the end of the summer, probably thinking September, in line with kind of a new clear way forward, is to launch the next generation CSPs to the wider public and to our stakeholders. So that's where we're on the journey, and key messages, we're presenting some stuff back to you today to make sure you're all up to speed with the journey to date, but there is more work to be done. So what is this framework of next generation CSPs that we're talking about? It's quite a holistic framework, and we're going to try and share some of it with you now. So it starts, as you would expect, with a vision and mission. We've said, as a group of CSPs, as a collective network, we need a shared vision for the future and a shared mission. Now, this isn't particularly radical. It isn't, I hope, very different from your own individual mission and vision, and it won't be very different from the Sport England and Sporting Futures vision for the future either. So real good alignment. But it is about creating active lifestyle, creating a sector and the communities where active lifestyles are the norm. But importantly, the social value of grassroots sport is recognised. Sport and physical activity sector is flourishing. We know it's struggling in parts. It is inclusive. We know it's not as inclusive as it should be, and is meeting the needs of all our customers, and they're recurring themes throughout the rest of the framework. And our mission, transforming lives by growing grassroots sport and physical activity, and a real focus on what we can do to improve people's lives. So that's the first thing, clear mission and vision. The second element of the framework, a common purpose and functions. And this is something, again, you've said very strongly. We know we are a diverse group of organisations across the network, but what we do need is a real clear common purpose and a set of functions that aren't constraining, but that I can describe what you do collectively to external and particularly national stakeholders. So we want to keep this very high level. We don't want to get into the detail because we don't want to constrain local freedom. And in particular, this is the bit that we need to work through with Sport England to make sure that it's fully aligned with the core funding, core specification, new role and relationship with Sport England that will follow. I'll come back to that in a second. So what is our core purpose? We've described our core purpose as this: creating the conditions for success in locality sport and physical activity development. We've had a look at the new strategy. We've had a look at what other people do in the sector. What we're trying to do here is differentiate what we do from other players. And we've really said the new strategy is around a local, bottom-up approach to sport and physical activity. We know NGBs focus on driving their sport. We know local authorities have other agendas to meet. We know other partners have other contributions to make. Our role is to create the conditions in our localities that all comes together and works well for our communities. And underpinning everything, or driving everything, I should say, is customer satisfaction and impact. Really driving impact for our customers and making sure they're more satisfied than they are now with the experience that they get. So what does that look like in terms of some of the functions? We've just gone for now with 3 headline functions, and again, this will be refined through the ongoing conversations with Sport England. But really at the heart of it, backing up that statement around us being more strategic organisations, influencing strategy and investment to maximise the impact of resources, guiding investment decisions, getting people, and particularly strategic agencies, much more behind the sport and physical activity mission. Secondly, and briefly, if my clicker works, guiding participants' relationship with sport. And this doesn't mean delivering to those participants. It means helping our colleagues to understand behaviour change, guiding their behaviour change journey. Lost it altogether now. Help. It means guiding their improvement, their behaviour change journey. Colleagues. Guiding their behaviour change journey, activating and amplifying national campaigns such as This Skill Can and others, and really making sure that participants have got an easier journey into and through physical activity and sport. The third section, which you can't see, is around guiding the market. So if we're saying we're strategic organisations, we've got a really important role to play in helping the sector locally. And we kind of sit above the sector in our patch. And our role is to support, get investment into them, guide them. Where we've been very supportive in the past, i.e. we provide some training and we'll help you to do what you're trying to do. The key shift here, I think, is that we want to shape that sector. We don't just want to support it to do some of the same stuff it's always done. We want to help it to move into different places and to do different things in different ways. And all of that underpinned by this customer-centric and market development approach. Shaping the market and making sure everything we do is driven by customers and their needs. And there are some great work going on in CSPs testing out what does a customer-centric CSP look like and what does that mean in reality. And there's some great pilot work going on with some of you on that. So we've set out some common purpose and functions, and as I say, that really is impacted by our core role in relationship with Sport England because, of course, they drive and fund a lot of that work, a lot of the consistent work and services that we provide across the country. So our task at the moment is to seek total alignment between what Sport England want us to do to drive their strategy and what we think we're well placed to do. So Sport England is asking the question, we've got to deliver our strategy and government strategy. How can CSPs help us to deliver that? We're asking the question, we've got a great network of CSPs. What is the best contribution we can make to the national strategy that's there? And we're pretty close, I think, to coming together. So when I talk about a strategic role, Sport England, I think, will be very supportive and will say some more about the strategic role that we need to play this morning. Jenny Price, first keynote speaker this morning, and she will talk about their emerging thoughts about the challenges ahead in terms of local delivery, and the role that they are starting to think that CSPs can play. And many of you will have heard some of that already in the consultation sessions that have gone on over the last month. But we do think we have a real strong role to play in the strategy, more so than ever before. And there's real alignment more than there's ever been before. So in the past, in the last strategy, you were telling us regularly that you were having to try and find alignment between the national strategy and what your local partners needed. They were focused on social outcomes, the national strategy very much sport, very much participation driven. And now there's greater alignment. You were saying your local partners were really focused on young children and young people, and the national strategy started at 14 and went above. We've now got better alignment. You said the strategy was very much national, top-down, top-heavy strategy, and we now have a bottom-up strategy. So great alignment, and actually teases up well, I think, for a new and improved relationship with Sport England, which will be the topic of Jenny's presentation later. So that's the third element of the framework, finalising those core purpose and functions and creating alignment with Sport England. More recently, we've started to think about our role and our work as a theory of change. And again, this has come from you, because some of you are starting to think about, you're developing outcomes frameworks, you're developing theory of change for your locality. So we started to think, is there a theory of change, a real headline theory of change that describes our collective journey and what we're trying to do? And so just briefly to outline this centres on saying we need to maximise the social and economic impact of sport. And I must admit, a lot of what I've seen from the national strategy from government says the big shift is we're going to be driven by these 5 headline social, economic, health outcomes. And yet, I think a lot of the narrative, a lot of the discussion is still kind of incidental to those things. It's still saying we're kind of going to try and shift slightly what we do so that we can argue that it makes a direct contribution to those outcomes. What we're suggesting in this theory of change is that we totally reframe that and say, actually, let's start with the social outcomes, which I think is what government really are saying, and let's rethink backwards from there what it is we need to do differently to demonstrate the impact that they can have. So again, starting with our vision, active lifestyles becoming the social norm, how do we get to that point? Well, we need to maximise, one of the things we need to do is to maximise the socio-economic impact of sport, to really make sure that it's not incidental. We know sport does good things for people and communities, but we need to make that deliberate and intended in order to maximise the contribution. So not just hope that it happens, but make sure that it's totally being maximised. To get to that point, what we think we need is system change, and that'll be a recurring theme this morning from the 2 keynote presentations later on. And sport needs to really earn its place around top tables and earn its public investment and other investment from those key strategic networks. And so it's not good enough for us to put on a project and to articulate the outcomes that it can have. We need to get to a place where those agencies get it. The value and contribution of sport isn't in question. They understand it, they're committed to it, and they're willing to invest in it in a systematic way, so that the days of us having to make the case are gone. But that's some way off. That's probably 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 years. So what steps do we need to take in order to get there? And we think a critical one is about consistent measurement, so that we can make the case and evidence the contribution that sport and physical activity is making to those social outcomes. In order to be able to measure it, we need to deliver it. And so our execution of effective interventions needs to be absolutely nailed down. We need to make sure we deliver those outcomes. And through delivering those outcomes, we believe we will reduce inactivity and we will target the most underrepresented groups, because they are the groups that we need to target in order to deliver and maximise the contribution to those outcomes. Some of the customers we need to get to are really the most difficult to engage and influence. And so we're going to really need good and newly thought out strategies to engage customers. And it probably isn't us engaging those customers, it's probably finding other people who can engage those customers. And again, I see work across the network where you're starting to work with new different organisations, trusted organisations, and maybe delivery agencies outside of sport. So we've talked about strategic agencies outside of sport, but who are the delivery agencies outside of sport that have contact with the groups that we're trying to engage? In order to do that, we need a really well-designed intervention, and I think CSPs have got a great role to play in helping the sector design better interventions in order to engage those participants. And in order to develop and deliver interventions, we need investment, we need support, and we need commitment. So we've got a real strategic influencing job to get the strategic commitment that we need in our localities, and ideally to get some, in the first case, probably relatively small investment to help us make the case, leading towards the end of this theory of change to that systematic, scalable investment. And in order to get them on board, we need a fit-for-purpose sector, because we know the challenge that comes back from many of those agencies, that our sector is servicing its own current participants, and it isn't interested in either those social outcomes or those inactive people or those underrepresented groups. So we've got a real job to do to get our sector in the game and on board with us. And then finally, to drive all of that, and we've talked about this before, and we'll be, again, doing some work on this throughout the event, real compelling insight and evidence in order to make that case, in order to drive the sector, in order to do everything else. So just to walk through that theory of change, a very headline overview of what we might be trying to achieve across the network. Getting the insight and evidence right, making the case, supporting our sector, finding the people who want to be doing this work and supporting them to do it, getting that stakeholder commitment, developing well-designed interventions, engaging our customers, delivering that effectively, measuring it, creating that system change. And this, as I say, is 4, 6, 8-year journey. So it's just something to think about as what our collective theory of change might be to create that change over the next few years. And I think some of Jenny and Martin's presentations this morning in the keynotes will echo some of that. Said, I would encourage you to think about in your teams what it is that you need to know and just be able to reel off in your teams and how you might get your teams all up to speed with the key stats, both nationally and for your area. And also think about your own theory of change. What is the theory of change that you're working towards in your area, and what's the thinking behind that, and what are you driving at? Okay, so moving on to the next final few elements of the framework. And the next one is our good to great work. So many of you will be familiar that over the last few years we've launched and introduced a good to great improvement journey, really focused on how we can help you to drive improvement in your own CSPs. And from a standing start, I think that's been a sector-leading improvement framework that Adrian and Graham largely have put together with the support of our improvement group. So with the new next generation CSPs, we need to think about what good to great looks like in the future. Adrian.
Thank you, Lee. Good morning, everybody. So we've been debating actually about this term good to great. So I think people are familiar, that's the term that we use to describe our improvement journey. And Lee's mentioned there about good to great 2. So my view is that we never stop improving. We're constantly looking for greatness. That's something that we always do. So do we need the 2 at the end? So it's a bit of an internal debate. So I haven't won that argument yet. So watch this space. But I'm going to describe some of our current thinking, if you like. So these are some of the things that we're starting to think about. And you can see in the centre is that real drive around customer centricity and collaboration and making improvement really at the heart of everything that we do. That's what we want to be common to everybody. If we want to have 44 high-performing teams, that needs to be at the heart of everything that we do. And obviously, the national team, the improvement group, are here to support that. And then what we've done is identify a number of areas that will help us to get to that high-performance place. I'm not going to go through them all, and hopefully quite a few of these things are fairly familiar to you. Our role is to really complement what you're doing at a local level and make sure it's consistent and really add value. And we know that there's a lot of great stuff already going on, and we're kind of picking it up and trying to replicate that and spread it across. So what you'll see over the next 2 days is a lot of these themes coming out. So a lot of the clinics, a lot of the workshops, some of the keynote speeches are talking to some of these themes. And if we can get these things right, I think we can really move the network forward. On the hub, we've started to articulate what some of this looks like. We've really adopted an action learning approach. So especially around customer centricity, around impact, around insight, we've been working with you, with a number of CSPs, to really understand what does that look like, what does good practice look like, what are some of the trailblazers doing, and then bring that together into some kind of framework, into learning documents, into guides. So you can click on that now, and you'll start to get some information. But obviously, it's an emerging picture. It's very much emerging in relation to what Lee said in relation to Sport England and the core spec. So we'll keep going back to it, we'll keep refreshing it, and we'll keep adding to it and improving upon it. The good news is that we're starting, I think, from really good foundations. We've already got a menu of improvement, which hopefully most of you are familiar with, where we've got lots of different elements that are helping you to go from good to great. The bottom two, if you can read them, the training needs analysis and the self-assessment tool are great ways for you, both individually and collectively, to assess your training needs, your strengths to build on, and your weaknesses to fill those gaps. So there are tools out there that if you're not familiar with, I'd really urge you to go in and have a look at. Again, they're on the hub, and the link is there. And then the other thing, particularly around these times of change, is around coaching and mentoring, which again, we've got on your table, we've got a mentoring offer. And I'd really urge you to think about that. Either for you individually or for your teams, we've got both of those offers. If you're moving into a new role, if you're taking on a new responsibilities, leadership, or whatever it is, whatever your development needs, we've got people who can support you in that process. Again, on your table, we've got some information on that. In your packs, we've got some information on that. So if you are interested, just register your interest with me, send me an email, and we'll be sending out further details, particularly around the peer mentoring, which we'll be relaunching around May time. The other thing in your pack is the online training information for board members. We've run this last year and we're running it again. Governance Essential webinars. We've got 4 coming up. Again, those are in your pack and they will support your board in relation to their improvement journey. The final thing is, I think we've got a reasonable offer out there and we've based it on your needs, but we'd like to be more effective and efficient around really understanding your needs. Obviously, a lot of things that we do, we're asking you to opt into. We'd like to get a deeper understanding of your individual needs and try to tailor some of this support around your improvement journey, around where you are with these particular areas. So that's a discussion and a debate that we want to have with the improvement group. Lee's mentioned that this email is coming out towards the end of this session. So any initial ideas, we'll be very grateful to receive them, and we'll carry on the debate with the improvement group and then feed that all back to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Adrian. And just to reiterate, so our Good to Great journey, I think it's been a great thing that we've developed over the last couple of years. What I personally hope we can do is get even more resources behind it to scale it up, make it even more bespoke along the lines that Adrian describes to exactly what you need in your CSP. So that's some work we'll be doing over the next few months to scale it up and improve it further. Okay, so the next element of the framework, as we come in towards the back end of it, is this thing we describe as creating more than the sum of the parts. And this is just taking, if a lot of that work is in improving you as individual organisations and individual people working in those organisations. Our USP really is the fact that we're a network across England. So what do we need to do to make sure that we're creating more than the sum of the individual elements of CSPs? And we've been giving some thought to this, and we've had some debates with you in some of the sessions, and there was thoughts of a code of conduct that people sign up to, more of a collective will. And just last week, one of the directors was feeding back to me from discussions in one of the regional directors groups that actually this isn't about, well, it certainly isn't just about CSPN sort of asking CSPs to do certain things. This is about the people in this room having a will and a genuine will and discipline to work together to create an impactful collective network. And so alongside that, we've also been thinking, what kind of network do we want? Is this a top-down hierarchical network? And I think we're pretty clear that isn't the kind of network that we aspire to be. So this diagram tries to articulate the kind of network we aspire to be. Central team supporting you, but you all supporting each other really well and really closely. And there's a great intent across the network on all of these fronts, but sometimes implementation is where it falls down. So we know you want to collaborate and work together and support each other, but sometimes we don't quite have the protocols and discipline in place to do it. So we've started to think about what this might look like, and we'll be developing this over the next few weeks. And we've come to this idea of a memorandum of understanding between us and more of a three-way process. So setting out commitments from CSPs to other CSPs, for example, more disciplined collaboration processes. We know we've got projects underway to drive that. And for us to perhaps facilitate better peer-to-peer support, particularly when people are having challenges or maybe when they're new to post. And the mentoring that Adrian's just mentioned can be a key component of that. See, the national team to CSPs, what might our commitments and expectations be? And I think we need to get better at engaging you. We try very hard, better communications, getting your views, making sure we do that in a more disciplined way. But also, you've said to us, we need to be clearer on our expectations of you. So if this is really an opt-in thing, then say so. If this is something that it would be nice if most of us or all of us did, then say so. If this is something that really, for it to work, we all have to get behind, then be clear that that's our expectation or hope on you. So some things for us to think about there in terms of how we might work with you. And then finally, our ask of CSPs up to the CSP national team. And building on what Adrian just said, I think a key starting point for this is for you to share your improvement plans, your improvement priorities, and your improvement journeys back with us, so we really understand your needs. But we also need you to participate in network-wide activities in a more disciplined way. So we almost always get 30, 40, sometimes 43 out of 44 CSPs participating in some of our surveys, some of our improvement work. And we probably do need you to cooperate and collaborate with us in a stronger way. So over the next few weeks, we're going to try and build this model further, building this memorandum of understanding and making sure it's a three-way memorandum of understanding. And then moving on to partnerships and programs. And we've had a look at what we've done in terms of our partnerships and programs. And certainly on partnerships, what I think we've done is tried to do too much. So we've tried to partner and encourage everybody to work with CSPs and CSPN. And I think what we've come to here is that we need to be a little bit more targeted and a little bit more focused. We've got lots of bidding and funding opportunities, both nationally and you have locally. And so we need a stronger critique of what the real opportunities are that we should go for. Similarly, with partner organisations, who are the ones that we really should be focused? Some of them are with us over the next 2 days. We've just supported a bid by UNF. It was their bid, but we were a supporting partner. We've got podium partners here today who we're doing some joint work with, and we're just in the process of developing a memorandum of understanding with CIMSPA and in early discussions with the likes of Street Games and Sported. So trying to work out who are the key partners that we need to work more effectively with, which programmes we should pursue in the future, and where we should try and seek resource to make sure they're really impactful, they really fit with our new strategy, and they're really things that you can get behind and the whole network can get behind. So a few examples there, but again, the ask to you is to let us know, who do you think we should be partnering with at a national level? Where have you got strong partnerships locally that perhaps could be scaled up and be of value to other CSPs across the country? So again, more work to do on that. And then the penultimate piece of the jigsaw is something that you fed back to us regularly throughout this 12 months. All of the sessions, we've talked about all these ideas of how we need to evolve and what the next generation CSPs might look like. And consistently, at almost every session, the question has come back to us, well, given all this that we're saying about role, mission, purpose, does the name County Sports Partnerships still fit with that future direction? And if we are going through a significant period of change, if ever we were going to look at potentially changing that name and brand, surely now is the time to do that. So at the AGM in November, we put that back to the CSP directors, and the CSP directors said, yes, now is the time to do a proper review of our name and brand and consider whether this is the time to change. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle here, who we handed that baton to, that very challenging baton, and said, Michelle, have a more detailed look at this and tell us if now is the right time to relook at our brand and name. Michelle.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Michelle Leavesley, and it gives me great pleasure to chair the National Marketing Steering Group. I've got 2 minutes to give you a very quick overview, but just to say I'm here for the next couple of days, and a number of the steering group are also here, so please do grab us. As Lee has talked about a lot of change and has talked about the next generation, and this was very much the brief that we were given as a team to review the brand and see if it was match fit, particularly with a view to strengthening the influence and looking at the social outcomes, as Lee alluded to earlier. So 4 parts. There was consultation at the AGM. There was the National Steering Group, who then fed into the process at Christmas. And they very much felt that it was important to get an external perspective. Found it very hard, when you're in it, really hard to be independent within that discussion. So we went out to external partners and asked them what they felt. And there were some key questions that we were exploring as part of that review. Lee's talked about customer centricity, but there were other elements that we also wanted to look at as part of that review. So interestingly, we went out to a variety of partners from health and sport, investors, collaborators, and unanimously they fed back that they believed it was time for us to look at a name change. And just there was a whole load of different feedback that will be shared in the report with all CSPs, but these are just some of the headlines. So they told us we were asking the wrong question, that actually CSP Network, they didn't use the term CSP Network, they used the term CSPN. So we were an acronym, talked about us being a trade union, a bit of a closed shop, and that we were quite descriptive rather than dynamic. So the overarching feedback was, it's time to change, this is a good time to change, it's a good time to look at our direction moving forward. And this, I thought would be nice to share with you, as a key quote from one of our investors, key investors, and it was about us coming together more strongly as an entity, dynamic, national, local, working really strongly together. And they believed that this was a great opportunity for us to really showcase what we were about at a national, regional, local level. And then we followed up with yourselves, and thank you very much for all of you who contributed to that process. And again, some interesting stats. This is just a few of the key findings that came back from yourselves. But 25% of CSPs weren't even using the national brand. And one of the concerns that had been raised by National Marcoms was the expense, that a rebrand could be expensive, but actually 25% of CSPs weren't using the national collateral at all. And a number was saying it's not reinforcing what we're doing locally. Actually, we've gone through a rebrand in the last 5 years, and we want you guys to keep up. So it was about us lifting our game. The bottom line was that 40% said it's time to change. 30%, worryingly, was still on the fence. So again, if you were part of that 30%, I'd love to get a little bit more feedback from you in the next couple of days. But overwhelmingly, you asked for us to keep it really simple, and also to make sure that we reinforce the geographical coverage that we had as a collective of CSPs. So that is something that will be fed into the process. So conclusions and next steps is that we will be progressing with a name change. You've provided a lot of feedback on what type of name that might be, as have our external partners. There are a number of partners also looking at name change at the same time, so we also need to be aware of the market and the stakeholders that we're working with. But our timelines, as Lee has alluded to, in the bigger process, this integrates into the bigger process. So by September, we would like to launch the new look, the new name, and the new feel of the brand. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And yeah, a real tough job. If you're expecting a big reveal, then clearly we're not at that stage. And I think you'd have been wondering where it had come from if we had. And going back to this email that you'll get at the end, a really good call to action there is we're now at the stage of saying, okay, well, what could it be? What might it be? And of course, everybody will have a view, but we want your view. So the call to action here, when you get that email, send us back your view on what suggestions of what you think county sports partnerships and the CSP network might be called in the future, or at least key considerations. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so that's the new brand and name, and the final piece of the jigsaw of the framework, if you've not already guessed it, and we really wanted to come to this last at the end of this whole process, is what therefore is the role that you want the CSP Network national team to play. And again, as with all the rest of this is work in progress. We're showing you where we've got to with some of the thinking. And what we've been debating here is the fact, well, certainly when our new board came in last summer, they said, well, everybody expects us to influence, drive and lead what CSPs do locally, but actually we don't fund them, we don't performance manage them, we don't have very much leverage or control over them. They're an independent group of CSPs for which we support. So we explored with some of you, and we explored with Sport England and other stakeholders. Is that right? Should that try and shift? Sport England is the main funder and performance manager of the network. Maybe they should, the time is right, some CSPs suggested, for CSP Network to take on more of that responsibility. The conclusion, having had that dialogue, is the time isn't right for that, and that Sport England is really important to you and us as a key funder, key partner, and it's important that they retain that role. So therefore, the role we see for the national team is very much as your improvement agency, driving improvement and learning around our core purpose, which is creating the conditions for success. What does it take to affect the change we're trying to create locally and to make CSPs as impactful as they could? And that does then involve some of these other things around providing leadership to stretch your thinking, creating tools, our good to great journey, training and guidance to provide support. What we'd like to do is provide more targeted support where it's needed, and we need you to ask for help when you need it. You have consistently told us, though, that you still wanted to secure those new partnerships, programs and resources to help you deliver more impact and do the job better and support your local sustainability. And of course, there's always an advocacy and promotion piece to help people understand what we're about, and probably part of that takes us back to the brand as well as some of those partnerships that we can develop. So that's where we got to on that. And again, call to action, you'll get the email. What do you think the role of the CSP Network national team should be as we look to finalise that over the coming months? And it very much flows off the back of the framework. So my timing is almost spot on. We're a minute late, so I'm happy with that. This is the framework that we've started to develop, trying to look holistically at what the next generation CSP should look like and what change we might want to see. It's work in progress. I explained the journey that we're on, but we hope to draw this to a conclusion over the summer, very much in collaboration with DCMS and particularly Sport England, so that their role and remit for the CSPs is totally aligned with our framework moving forward, and you'll hear more about that from Jenny shortly. The purpose of this session, therefore, just to remind you, was to set the scene for the event ahead, remind you of some of the key thinking, some of the key themes, to put into context some of the sessions and learning that you'll have. Jenny on our relationship and role with Sport England now. Martin will talk to us about devolution and impacting wider social agendas as a great next link on, and I'll introduce that to you now.